see her. I don't see her.
The House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms.
The House is now in session. All persons not entitled to privileges of the floor, please retire to the gallery.
The members will rise and be led in prayer by Dr. E. Tracy Spar, Southside Church of the Nazarene, Chesterfield, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which will be led by the delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
First, may I thank Delegate Ingram for his great privilege to lead you in prayer. But what a greater privilege it is for us to go before the God of heaven in prayer. Father in heaven, you are holy. May your kingdom come. May your will be done in our lives as it is in heaven. We pray for those in authority, our president, governor, and all representatives. All authority comes from you. We are stewards who are responsible to you. In this place of many speeches and many opinions, may we now pause to listen to you. Help us to disagree agreeably. Let us speak with respectful discourse. Let us not tear down others who are made in your image also. Let us defend our ideas vigorously without attacking people. Give us the integrity and civility that upholds good government. Forgive us our sins, Jesus, as we forgive those who have sinned against us. For yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, and yours is the glory forever. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The members will answer the roll call by indicating their presence on the electronic voting board.
Yes.
Sorry.
Clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I've examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for January 30th, 2018. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39 pursuant to the provisions of Rule 40 are now in order. The clerk shall announce the first morning hour of business, including any clerk's announcements and communications.
Mr. Speaker, in the first morning hour, I have no announcements or communications at this time.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a motion and an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, for my motion, on page 39, HB 1055, which is my bill, I would like to refer it back to the Committee on Courts of Justice. It seems that we passed the bill with the amendments instead of the substitute.
What was that bill number?
HB 1055.
Right. Delegate Herring moves that on page 39 that HB 1055 be re-referred. What committee? I apologize.
Courts of Justice.
The Courts of Justice Committee. All those in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That bill is re-referred to the Courts of Justice Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I rise for the purpose of introduction. In the House, joining us today in the gallery are the students from George Mason University. They are accompanied by their president, Dr. Angel Cabrera. Mason is the largest public university in Virginia with more than 36,000 students. Approximately 81% of the enrollment are in-state students. U.S. News and World Report ranks Mason as one of the top universities in the country. Also in 2016, Mason was recognized as a Carnegie Tier 1 research university, one of only 115 universities with such designation, and one of only a handful without a medical school. The students here are members of the Mason Student Government Organization. They are in Richmond today for Mason Lobbies, which is an annual event during which students and alumni advocate for a higher education at George Mason University student priorities at the state level. They have spent the morning in discussion with their legislators and observing their state government in action. Please join me and an alumna of this fine university in welcoming them to the Capitol and saying, "Go Patriots."
Print it out for you. Dr. Cabrera, we certainly welcome you and the students from George Mason, and just thank you for not only the student government officials being here, but all that George Mason does for our Commonwealth.
It shows both amendments. Print that out for him.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate McQuinn.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for 2 introductions.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to you some amazing women and awesome women that are in the gallery today. It is the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. In 1970 in New York City, 24 black women led by visionary Edna Beach began meeting in their homes to assess the problems and opportunities left behind in the wake of the turbulence of 1960s. As a result of their meeting, they formed the Coalition of 100 Black Women. They persistently worked to master root causes of issues that affected their families, their communities, and women in particular, and soon became a visible force of influential women promoting gender and racial equity. In 1981, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated was born with a reach today that extends throughout 60 chapters representing 28 states. Today, we are joined by representatives from the Richmond metropolitan area, Tidewater area, Charlottesville metropolitan area, and Northern Virginia chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated, who are here advocating on the behalf of African American women and other women of color through national and local action and strategic alliances that ultimately impact a number of citizens in the Commonwealth. I want to express our shared respect and admirations for these amazing women and the work that they are doing, and especially those who are joining us today. So I ask that you would please join with me as we give them a warm welcome to the GA, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women.
The House would like to welcome the National Coalition of 100 Black Women and all the Virginia chapters, and thanks so much for what you do. Ms. Delegate has the floor, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we also have an amazing young lady that's in the gallery as well that's standing. This young lady, none other than Rosalind McAllister Brock, who was born in Fort Pierce, Florida. She received her bachelor's degree from Virginia Union University, where she graduated magna cum laude. She earned 3 masters, one in healthcare administration from George Washington University, one from the business administration from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and from from Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University in 2009. She worked for 10 years in healthcare management at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in Battle Creek, Michigan, and she joined the NAACP in 1984 as a freshman at Virginia Union University. She was named a youth board member that following year. She has also served as vice chair of the NAACP Health Committee. She was appointed chairman of the convention planning in 1999, but in February 2001, Dr. Brock was unanimously elected chairman of the NAACP National Board of Directors at the age of 35, being the youngest to be named and the first woman to serve. Currently, she holds the position of Chairman Emeritus of the National Association. She is also the Vice President of Advocacy and Governmental Relations for Bon Secours Health System. If you would join me at this time to welcome Dr. Brock to the GSA.
The delegate from Washington, the delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, joining us in the gallery today are some folks from Charlottesville associated with the Charlottesville Public Schools. Included in this group is their superintendent, Dr. Rosa Atkins. Dr. Atkins was a 2011 Virginia School Superintendent of the Year, and she's been down here several times. She was also the national runner-up last year for the Female Superintendent of the Year nationally, which is a pretty big deal. She also serves on the State Council of Higher Education. We have a number of students up in the gallery as well from the Charlottesville School Division. Charlottesville is known for many, many things, but I want to give you just a couple of things. Recently, the Charlottesville High School Science Club, which is called BACON for, you'll love this, Best All-Around Club of Nerds, represented Virginia when they competed in the global finals of the Zeros robotics programming competition. And during that competition, this is cool, their robots code literally controlled a satellite on the International Space Station, which was pretty neat. Of course, the Charlottesville High School Marching Knights represented Virginia in last year's London New Year's Day parade, and the fourth graders in Johnson Elementary School have been writing guest editorials for the New York Times, which I'm sure you all read. So I hope that we can welcome all of the Charlottesville representatives to the Capitol today and give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Atkins, we certainly want to welcome you as Superintendent of the Year and all the Charlottesville students and the amazing robotics team. So thank you very much. The delegate from Washington, Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 20, House Bill 801, I would move that we re-refer that to the Committee on Chesapeake, or Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources.
Doug O'Quinn moves that HB 801 be referred to the ACNR committee. All those in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That bill is referred to the ACNR committee. The delegate from Halifax, Delegate Edmonds.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an announcement.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow morning in room 200A of the Pocahontas building at 7 a.m., the Legislative Sportsman's Caucus will meet. We will have a report from DGIF's Lee Walker, and he will have an very informative presentation on the newly developed phone app and the ways that it will help our hunting and fishing constituents. And he'll also have other items of interest that will our constituents and hopefully ourselves would be interested in. And we will have refreshments with coffee and danishes. So please come and bring a friend, 7 a.m.
The delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today we are honored to have with us the Virginia Retired Teachers Association. If they can please rise. Members of the Retired Teachers Association are joining us in the gallery. There are over 7,000 of these retired teachers who truly live their motto, to serve, not be served. In the past 5 years, 83 units all across Virginia have given a total of $567,000 in scholarships to graduating seniors. But in addition to that, since 2012, they have, and I'm supposed to say it all the way, given 1,008,893.5 hours of voluntary service to the community and youth. We are so thankful for all that you have done, Mr. Speaker. In 1996, the General Assembly passed a resolution recognizing today, January 31st, as Retired Teachers Day. I hope you'll join me in giving them a warm House welcome.
The House would like to welcome the Virginia Retired Teachers Association and your motto, serve, not be served. Well said. Thank you for coming. The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of 2 introductions.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have in the gallery members of the Virginia Association for Hospices and Palliative Care Advocates for Quality Care for All Persons with Life-Limiting Illnesses. The association promotes hospice and palliative care education and ethical practices and serves as a united voice and resource for its members. With the opioid crisis affecting so many lives, the association is supporting one of my bills that would provide for their licensed employees to destroy drugs that are no longer needed by the patients. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Virginia Association for Hospices and Palliative Care.
The House would like to welcome the Virginia Association of Hospice and Palliative Care and hope you enjoy your visit to the Capitol. The delegate from...
And second introduction, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry.
I apologize.
No, my fault. Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the gallery, we have pharmacists and pharmacy students joining us for Pharmacy Day. They are here representing the Virginia Pharmacists Association, the Virginia Society of Health System Pharmacists, Appalachian College of Pharmacy, Hampton University School of Pharmacy, the Bernard J. Dunn School of Pharmacy, Shenandoah University, and my alma mater, the MCV VCU School of Pharmacy. These associations and schools represent the 8,400 pharmacists all across Virginia that provide vital health care services every day to Virginians. Services recognized as accessible, cost-effective, and high quality. Please join me in giving them a warm House welcome.
I'd also like to welcome all the pharmacy students on Pharmacy Day, and thanks for all you do. The delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here today in the gallery or either on the grounds, we have the senior class of Tidewater Academy in Wakefield, Virginia. They come every year to make sure they tour the Capitol and try to get a better understanding of government. So I'd like the House to give them a warm welcome, and I hope they're in the gallery. Please rise.
I also would like to welcome the students from Tidewater Academy. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Fillercorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an announcement.
Delegate has the floor.
As chair of the Arts Caucus, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite all my colleagues to a very special event tonight to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Virginia Commission for the Arts. It'll take place at the Virginia Museum for Fine Arts starting at 5 o'clock in the Marble Hall. Joining the attendees will also be 50 Arts Inspiration Award recipients from across the state who represent the very best in Virginia artistic talent and leadership over the last 50 years and will include many of our constituents. Our governor will also be attending tonight, and there will be live entertainment. We're very proud to celebrate the Virginia Commission for the Arts. This commission, as many of you might recall, was signed into law by Governor Mills Godwin on April 4th, 1968, a long time ago. This past year, the commission's board has traveled all over the state. They've been holding roundtables, discussions about the importance of the Commonwealth's culture as well as arts and the economic and social impact on our communities. From the Crooked Road to Southwest to the Wolf Trap Foundation for the Performing Arts in Northern Virginia, there are hundreds of arts organizations that open their doors to thousands of Virginians of all ages every single day. I hope many of you all will join me tonight to salute the creative and artistic talent, leaders that have helped shape our rich and diverse culture over the last 50 years. And also, Mr. Speaker and members, additionally, please mark your calendars for 2 Art Caucus meetings this session, where we will have the opportunity to continue to celebrate the arts. The first caucus meeting will be held Wednesday, February 7th, 8:30 to 9:30 in room 200B. We'll be joined by our former colleague, the now the current executive director of the Virginia Commission for the Arts, Margie Vanderhei, and we'll be discussing the relationship between workforce development and the arts in the Commonwealth and the synergies between the two. The second Arts Caucus will be a joint meeting of the Military Veterans Caucus and the Arts Caucus, as we do every year, hosted by myself, Senator Reeves, and Delegate Freitas on Wednesday, February 28th from 8 to 9 in the Senate subcommittee room. We'll also at that time be joined by George Mason University to discuss their University Veterans and Arts Initiative. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate Fuller-Corn. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Delaney.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the purpose of 2 introductions.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, in the gallery today we have advocates and members of the Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. They are here lobbying for the wellness and health of our youth and fighting for the well-being of our children. The Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics is the professional specialty organization for pediatricians, medical students, and residents in the Commonwealth of Virginia. With over 1,200 members, including community and academic pediatricians, this chapter has represented Virginia's pediatricians and advocated for Virginia's children since 1934. The organization is being represented today by its president-elect and my children's pediatrician, Dr. Sandy Chung, as well as 40 other pediatricians. I am personally thankful for all of their work and ask that the body give them a warm house welcome.
Certainly would like to welcome the American Academy of Pediatrics and certainly thank you for all you do. Delegate Delaney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, today I'd also like to recognize we have representatives from the Virginia Water Resources Research Center at Virginia Tech. Since 1965, the Research Center has been the Commonwealth's source of water-related research, support education, and public information about water issues of concern to the Commonwealth. They are an integral part of ensuring the quality and continuance of research on our waterways, and I thank them for being here today. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I wish a warm welcome and want to thank them for coming to the Capitol today.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, on page 21 of the printed calendar, may House Bill 1233 go by until Monday, February 5th.
Delegate Hugo moves that HB 1233 on page 21 of the calendar go by until Monday. All those in favor of that motion, signify by saying February 5th. Yeah, Monday, February 5th. All those in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion passes. Delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, today we are joined by a group of students, nuclear engineering students from Virginia Commonwealth University. And if they're in the gallery, there they are. They are also joined by representatives from the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium. Their group is visiting the Capitol today to discuss their economic impact of the industry as well as some of the workforce challenges that industry is facing. So I would hope it be the body's pleasure to extend a warm house welcome to the group of students and representatives from the Nuclear Energy Consortium.
Certainly want to welcome the VCU students to the Capitol. I hope you enjoy your stay. The delegate from Newport News, Delegate Mullen.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I rise with a heavy heart. Last week, we memorialized a great judge in the Honorable William T. Stone. I honestly wasn't expecting to rise again during this session for such a mournful purpose. This week in Newport News, we lost a judge, a father, and a friend. The Honorable Barry G. Logsdon of the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court passed away Sunday after a brief battle with cancer. Judge Logsdon was a native of Hampton Roads and a graduate of the College of William & Mary. He received his law degree from Regent University and opened his practice in Newport News in 1992. And he was later elected the Virginia State Bar's Young Lawyer of the Year in 1998. Judge Logsdon was appointed to the JDR bench in 2006 and quickly began presiding over our juvenile drug court. Mr. Speaker, I had the honor of speaking at the juvenile drug court graduation a few months ago, and Judge Logsdon's legacy was all around us. It was in the faces and the futures of hundreds of young men and women. It was in the sober eyes and clear hearts of those young people who had risen above great adversity to claim a bright life ahead of them. It was in the dozens of colleagues and friends who have worked with Judge Logsdon over a decade. Mr. Speaker, we are only granted a few moments in this world, and we do not know the time and day when our time will end. But we are obliged by our Creator to leave this world better than how we found it. Mr. Speaker, Judge Logsdon, Barry, left this world so much better. He made me and all those thousands of people who came through his courtroom better for that interaction. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn today. We do so in the honor and the memory of the Honorable Barry G. Logsdon.
Delegate Mullen moves that when the House adjourn today to adjourn in the honor and memory of the Honorable Barry G. Logsdon. Those in favor of that motion shall rise. Motion's agreed to. The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the Capitol, we are joined by folks from the Independent Empowerment Center over in Manassas, and these are folks who work with people with disabilities throughout the greater Prince William County area to make sure that they actually have the ability to, find work, to live independently, and to just get on their lives like any other person. I was so fortunate to be able to be joined by a large group of them this morning over in my office, and if it would please the House, I would love for us to all give them a warm House welcome.
Pursuant to House Rule 30, the Journal shall reflect that the following members are away on pressing personal business and are granted leave from today's session. Delegate Austin. The clerk shall announce the next order of business.
The second morning hour order of business or announcement of member requests to move legislation from the uncontested calendar to the regular calendar. Mr. Speaker, there are three move requests. On page 15 of today's printed calendar, House Bill second reading uncontested. Delegate Simons, House Bill 263 has been asked to be moved to the regular calendar by Delegate Gilbert. Also, on that same page and within that same category, Delegate Robinson's House Bill 371 has been requested to be moved to the regular calendar by Delegate Watts. And, Mr. Speaker, it's not a live portion of the calendar today, but House bills on first reading uncontested, page 25, Delegate Thomas's House Bill 119, that has been requested to be moved to the regular calendar by Delegate Carter.
The clerk shall announce the next order of business.
The third morning hour order of business are announcements of requests by members for legislation to go by for the day, and if any, the subsequent motion by the majority leader. Mr. Speaker, there are several. On page 10 of the printed calendar within House Bills third reading regular, Delegate Yancey, his bill, House Bill 79, has been requested to go by for the day by Delegate Yancey. Also, the two bills I mentioned previously in the House Bills second uncontested calendar, Delegate Simons, House Bill 263, in addition to being moved to the regular calendar, subsequent motion request is to have that go by for the day by Delegate Gilbert. Also within that same category, House Bill second uncontested on page 15, Delegate Robinson's bill has not only been moved to the regular, but has also been requested to go by for the day by Delegate Watts. Looking ahead to page 20 of the printed calendar, continuing in the category of House Bills second reading regular, Delegate Landis's House Bill 344 is requested to go by for the day by Delegate Landis. On page 22, Delegate Ware, House Bill 22, he has requested to have that go by for the day. And finally, Mr. Speaker, within that same category, second regular, on page 23, Delegate John Bell has requested his bill, House Bill 709, has been requested to go by for the day by Delegate Gilbert.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the delegate from Fairfax for a moment.
Thank you.
Delegate yields. Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that the request that 371 go by for the day not be on the docket, so that on the regular calendar, yes, but not by for the day.
Withdrawing the by for the day. Okay, the delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert. So that'll
Mr.
be
Speaker,
withdrawn.
I move that the remaining legislation as announced by the clerk go by for the day.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert, moves. The legislation is announced by the clerk go by for the day. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will announce the next order of business.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, the fourth morning hour order of business are members' recognition of members' requests for points of personal privilege. As always, the Speaker requests you all use your request to speak buttons to signify your desire to be recognized at this time.
The delegate from Bedford, Delegate Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise to address an issue that has been a matter of great contention in this chamber, in our capital, and in our Commonwealth, and in our nation, health care. As chairman of the Virginia Health Insurance Reform Commission, I know how challenging and frustrating this issue has become. I also know of the burden that is being borne by families in my area and across Virginia. Today, just this morning, I learned of someone else that is being burdened by this, that has to pay $4,800 a month for their insurance premium and then must meet a $7,500 deductible. While those who enacted the Affordable Care Act intended to ensure low-cost health care for all, that has not been the result. Despite being promised that they could keep their existing health plans, millions had them canceled. And although we were told that the act would make health care more affordable, staggering annual premium increases and exorbitant out-of-pocket expenses have become commonplace. But lamenting ACA's shortcomings is not the same as mitigating them. We do not have the ability to free ourselves from this federally imposed law, but we can act to alleviate some of its negative effects for those who sent us here. I realize Governor Northam and those on the other side of the aisle are again advocating the enactment of Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. But when the rate of uninsured Virginians is already close to the national average, and we know the budgetary difficulties experienced by other states who accepted this option, expanding a program that was never intended as a substitute for health insurance will not lower the cost of monthly premiums or reduce high out-of-pocket cost expenses. As all in this chamber know by now, those of us on this side of the aisle have reaffirmed our long-standing position against Obamacare's optional Medicaid expansion. For us, this is a matter of prudence, practicality, and principle. As my principals on the Health Insurance Reform Commission, Delegates Fillercorn, Delegate Ware, and Delegate Yancey can tell you, there are not quick or easy fixes to the affordability crisis. But there are things that we can do. I and many in the House shared the view of the Obama administration, which believed our COPN laws stifled competition and innovation and raised the cost of care. Our previous efforts did not find consensus on the other side of the Capitol. But this year, there are 19 House bills and 12 Senate bills, including 3 filed by Democrat senators to mitigate the costly effects of the Certificate of Public Need. Delegate Pillion and I have filed bills to make sure Virginians get the best price on prescription drugs. Either of these bills would prevent our constituents from being charged a $50 copay for a prescription that would cost $10 if they were paying cash. There's a bill I'm sponsoring that would protect your constituent from second billings, those billings that are considered hidden costs, a particularly aggravating situation if you ever had it happen to you. How many times have you gone somewhere, given them your insurance card, to turn around and have another service done, and lo and behold, you get a bill in the mail for something that you didn't know wasn't a part of your insurance that you provided? Later today, a bill I explained the other day with the assistance of the very fit and healthy Delegate Kilgore will be on third reading. It would give your constituents an incentive to shop for lower costs for care, which will put money in their pockets immediately and bring down costs in the long run. All of these bills are focused on lower costs and better care. If you want to put money back in the pockets of your constituent, these are bills that deserve our full consideration and support, and you're going to have an opportunity to vote on one of them very shortly. And they deserve our support regardless of party or your position on Medicaid expansion. If we leave this House without addressing the rising health care costs being experienced by the overwhelming majority of Virginians, both sides of the aisle will have failed, regardless of who prevails in another session-long battle over Medicaid expansion. Mr. Speaker, I ask all in this House, on both sides of the aisle, to not limit yourselves to the Medicaid impasse when addressing health care. That would be an opportunity lost. We have the chance to reform health care and lower costs for our citizens. Let's not blow it. Thank you.
The delegate from Culpeper, Delegate Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privileges.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the opportunity to watch the State of the Union addresses. I'm sure many people in here did. And I fully understand, having sit through a couple, as everyone here has as well, that you don't always expect a universal round of applause for every applause line. And I certainly don't expect everyone to provide 100% support to our chief executive, whoever it is, and regardless of what party. But I do want to compliment the president on something, because I think there was a common theme within the State of the Union address that we can all be proud of, not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans. When he talked about an economy that is finally recovering, not because the government is attempting to micromanage or relentlessly tinker with it, but because we finally removed tax burdens and regulatory burdens, which made it cheaper to do business 8,000 miles away than it did to run and expand businesses right here in the United States. By removing those burdens and putting faith back in the American people, not only are we seeing our own businesses expand, but we're seeing foreign companies that want to expand in the United States as a result, to the benefit not just of those companies, but to their employees, to the consumers, to all Americans. He also expressed a willingness to compromise on an issue which was near and dear to his administration and near and dear during the campaign, and that's on DACA. But what does he require? He requires nothing more than what Republicans required in the 80s when there was an amnesty deal signed at that point, and that is that we have a constitutional obligation to secure our borders. We have an obligation as a nation to protect American citizens, whether they were born here or whether they're immigrants. And while we as the American people can respect the dreams of people no matter where they come, our first obligation and responsibility is to our citizens to protect their liberties so that they can pursue happiness and pursue dreams. He also expressed a desire, I think it is very important, with respect to criminal justice reform and how we treat opioid crisis. Instead of putting an emphasis on incarceration, he put an emphasis on treatment, which is something that I think people on both sides of the aisle can get behind and support. When it comes to providing second chances for people, once they have served their time, once they have paid their restitutions for victims, he put an emphasis on the fact that we need to be able to work to reintegrate those people back into society so they can be productive members as well. When it came to national defense, He renewed his commitment to not just protect our veterans when they return and to make sure that they're properly cared for, but to ensure that our fighting men and women receive the best training and best equipment and best support on the planet. And he sent a very strong message to enemies of the United States around the world that they will not be confronted with equivocation, with fear, with compromise. If you are an enemy of the United States and you harbor true hatred for who we are as a people, you are going to be met with resolve and with the understanding that the full force of the United States military is there to protect the interests and the citizens of the United States. But I think the thing that I appreciated most about the State of the Union address is that as he went through each one of these points, he highlighted everyday American citizens, whether they were soldiers, whether they were welders, whether they were teachers, whether they were parents that have been the victims of violence. And he didn't hold them up as a white American or a black American or a brown American or a female American. He held them up as Americans. That was the unifying thread throughout all of this. I don't expect us to agree on everything, but I think he reminded us that we have a lot to be proud of in this country. And if you're wondering why there are so many people that every once in a while when Donald Trump says something that probably make everybody cringe a little bit, if you're wondering why sometimes a pass is given for that, it's because there is absolutely no doubt that this president loves this country and loves its people. And I think as we go forward, Mr. Speaker, and we look for ways to work together, if we can simply remember that common theme throughout the State of the Union address, that ultimately, at the end of the day, the thing that unifies us as a people is based on that understanding that we are a nation that believes in individual liberty, in equality before the law, and the ability to pursue happiness in accordance with your definition of it, provided you don't infringe on the rights of someone else to do the exact same thing. That should be a philosophy that we can all get behind, and I thank the President for articulating it yesterday. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Doug from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Doug has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. You know, I wasn't expecting to get up today and talk about the State of the Union. You know, I did watch television last night, and I'll tell you, the thing I really enjoyed watching was our colleague standing and speaking directly to the American public in Spanish and talking about what a great country it is and what great dreams we all have to make it even better. So I want to congratulate our colleague for being there and doing that. Now, beyond that, you know, I am the Democratic leader, so I really would be remiss if I didn't make some comments about the speech. Again, I got to vote on it, right? It was a good sign, I thought, that President Trump was using his teleprompter last night. I think that when he really gets into trouble is when he wakes up on Saturday morning and looks at his phone and starts playing around. Because as the delegate, wherever he went, as the delegate mentioned, there are good things in the speech, and I think people have to recognize those. Most notably, the implicit notion that we have a lot to be proud of in this country, and I think all of us know that. Nonetheless, you know, I think we have to look at things that the president said, and I harken back to Ronald Reagan, and, you know, sort of there he goes again. Trump has consistently made false and misleading claims that have only served to divide this country. This notion, for example, about DACA, that somehow he wants to fix DACA, he's been with that the whole time, it's just absurd. I mean, he's the one who undermined DACA and then threw it into the Congress's hands, and they can't seem to be able to do anything about it. He didn't have to do that. He did it. So let's remember that's what he did. And people who clap for him are essentially embracing what he did. You know, he talks about immigrants and how they're such a danger to this country. So here's the fact. Since 1975, immigrants from Trump's 7 travel-banned countries caused 0 fatalities. In contrast, guns, whether through suicides, murders, or accidents, contributed, and I'm not saying caused, contributed to 1.3 million Americans killed. So let's put this stuff in perspective a little bit. All right, what about the economy? Last night, President Trump said that black unemployment rate is at its record low. That is true, my friends. Hear, hear. But the rest of the story, it's dropped 1% under Trump, and it dropped 8 percentage points under President Obama. President Trump claimed that we just enacted the biggest tax cuts and reform in American history. I'm sorry, my friends, your other president did that. That was Ronald Reagan in 1981. And in fact, though, they had to reverse it 5 years later with the biggest tax increase at that time signed by Ronald Reagan in 1986. So another fact that I think is important to point out. He said there's a war on coal. Well, the war on coal has come from the marketplace. Coal employment has been in a long-term secular decline. And you'll love this, the newspaper industry has actually lost more jobs in recent years than coal. And the solar industry now employs 5 times more people than coal. Well, it is true that the president is right about the need to improve our infrastructure. American roads, bridges, and mass transportation are in need of improvement, and the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the U.S. infrastructure a grade of D+. But that costs money, investment. So where's the beef? We got to get the money. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, there's always another side to the story. But I think and I hope that we can keep in mind that there is a lot to be proud of, independent of what we do with the Russian inquiry. And there's a lot that we can do together in this chamber to make things even better. And I hope that we will rededicate ourselves to doing that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize for going out of order, but would we be able to go back to the first portion of the morning hour for the purpose of an introduction, please?
The delegate can. Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today as part of the Virginia Municipal League Day, a number of our localities and their representatives are in town visiting with us and talking about their priorities. I just learned that the town of Vienna, which I have the honor of representing in my district, is here represented by our Mayor, Lori DeRocco, as well as other council members and our senior staff. So I'd like to ask them to stand and in the House to give them a warm House welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House would like to welcome the members of the Virginia Municipal League to the Capitol. If the House will indulge me, I want to take a moment to announce a new floor procedure for the consideration of committee amendments and committee substitutes, as well as floor amendments and floor substitutes. I would like to take this opportunity to explain to the members of the House how I will recognize members for the consideration of proposed committee amendments or committee substitutes, as well as floor amendments or floor substitutes. Moving forward, committee amendments will always be considered first. I believe the sequencing will eliminate the need for decisions relating to which amendment is broader, as has been the custom of the House, and create a more uniform process for amendments. The new process has its roots in the procedures of Jefferson's manual that this House values and relies upon pursuant to House Rule 80. And let me quote, "On taking up a bill reported with amendments, the amendments only are read by the clerk. The Speaker then reads the first and puts it to the question, and so on, till the whole are adopted or rejected before any other amendment may be admitted. When through the amendment of the committee, the Speaker pauses and gives time for amendments to be proposed in the House to the body of the bill, as he does also if it had been reported without amendments. So, if a bill is reported from committee with a committee amendments or a committee substitute, then the first item considered will be the motion to adopt the committee amendments or the committee substitute. Subsequent floor amendments, substitutes, would be viable for consideration, provided they did not conflict with the previously adopted committee amendments or committee substitute. If there is a conflict, then they would not be in order unless the previously adopted amendments were reconsidered and rejected. For example, if a committee reported a substitute and a member wanted to offer a floor substitute as an alternative, like we did yesterday during consideration of Delegate Kilgore's HB 239 dealing with Sunday hunting, the committee substitute would be considered first. The patron of the floor substitute may choose to explain his alternative. However, a vote on the floor substitute would not occur unless the committee substitute was rejected or reconsidered, if previously adopted. However, floor amendments, line amendments, would be in order to an adopted committee substitute. Should the House find itself in need of adopting a floor substitute after the adoption of a committee substitute, then the proper method for its consideration would be to reconsider the adoption of the committee substitute, reject the committee substitute, then move adoption of the floor substitute. Finally, floor amendments will be considered in line-numbered order of the bill. If two or more members offer floor amendments to the same line number, then the amendments will be considered in the order of submission by the member. I trust you will find this refined procedure more efficient and uniform in application. I've asked the clerk to share this information with the body later today so everyone is fully aware of this floor process for amendments. And I thank you. Does any member have any further announcements or introductions or motions?
Mr. Speaker, my speak button is not.
Yes, delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate may state it.
Mr. Speaker, I recognize, of course, the ability of the Speaker to determine, make rulings on parliamentary motions, but I guess I would just ask a parliamentary question. Isn't this different from the way we've always done it here in this body?
Might be different, but one of the reasons I was so careful to quote Jefferson's manual, I would say that this is a more efficient process, and I would say, frankly, probably a better process, making sure that the committee action, which probably should take precedent, takes precedent. So I think it's a very proper exercise by the chair.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate may
Thank you. I'd ask if in the past we have considered very big bills. I can recall 3202, 2313. We can make up some numbers. And oftentimes those bills have come to us on the floor with a major floor substitute. One of the worries that I have with this new rule is that it would seem to make it almost impossible without a lot of machinations to get that floor substitute properly before the body, because you have to essentially undo all of the other committee amendments and any other amendments that are before the body. Has the chair thought about that difficulty?
I would think when the committee substitute is being considered and you have a floor substitute which you think is relevant, you would make that argument then. If you're convincing, then the House would simply not adopt the committee substitute, and then, of course, you would be able to adopt the floor substitute. If you had a situation by which you adopt the committee substitute, and then you decided later that you want to go with the floor substitute, and only in that case would you do a reconsideration motion. So I think it'll work itself out fine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, you stated that the amendments would be taken in order of line number. Shall it be the discretion of the person with the first line number to pass by temporarily and allow for further line numbers to be, further amendments to be considered?
I certainly think you can make that motion, but the intent of it basically is to try to create some order so the lower line number would be considered first, which makes sense. If they're in conflict, then it would be the first member basically to propose it. Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, would it not be correct that the general premise behind Jefferson's standing in that would be that if a committee of this body has deliberated over a matter and brought that before us for consideration, that before we summarily dismiss it for an alternative, the body should, in deference to the committee process, give due consideration to the language presented by the committee?
I think the delegate is exactly correct. Okay, once again, does any member have any further announcements, introductions, or motions? If not, the clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for the Virginia House of Delegates for today, Wednesday, January 31st, 2018. First category, House bills on third reading, uncontested calendar. Beginning on page 1 of the calendar, 24 bills in the uncontested third reading block. Those bills are as follows. House Bill 139, page 2, House Bill 206, 212, 228, 313, 451, 552. Page 4, printed calendar. House Bills 563, 627, 776. House Bill 842 has an emergency clause on it. Continuing with the block. House Bill 852, House Bill 906. Turn to page 6 of the printed calendar. House Bill 907, 909, 915, 1071, House Bill 1130. Turning to page 8. Continuing with the calendar, third reading, uncontested block, House Bills 1173, 1194, 1198, House Bill 1277, House Bill 1395, and completing the block, third reading, uncontested calendar, House Bill 1426.
Shall the bills pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, noes 0.
Ayes 99, noes 0. The bills pass.
Continuing with today's calendar, next category, House bills on third reading, regular calendar. House bills, third reading, regular, page 10 of the printed calendar. First up, House Bill 1001. It is a bill to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to health care shared savings, required disclosures by health care providers, and health insurance incentive programs.
Shall the bill pass?
Mr. Speaker.
My fault. Didn't look at the board. Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would require that Virginia licensed health plans buy and provide technology that would allow their members to shop amongst the in-network providers and then share the savings with the member if they chose the lowest option. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's a couple problems with this. One is that the way the insurance companies are regulated, they would have to pass these substantial administrative costs on to the consumer, so premiums would go up. That is exactly what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to get move to markets where premiums go down. Second, as if you're a consumer that has a high deductible policy, you can't share in savings until you've met the deductible. So if it's really high, this is going to be meaningless for people with a high deductible plan. Third, no one's done this except Maine. When this is moving out experimental program. Our industry here in the state is not supportive of this. I love being pro-Virginia. This is only passed in the state of Maine for four subject areas: imaging, physical therapy, lab service, and infusion therapy. That's the only thing they shop for and get rebates for in the one state that has done this. So we have an untested program in the fully insured market. There are markets where they're not fully insured, where there are companies have, like the state plan, where you can do this type of thing. But we're talking about the market I mentioned yesterday, where you go out and shop for a group plan for your employers, that are plans that are put together in concert and legal because of the laws that we pass in this body, the fully insured market. Just untested in that market. Premiums would go up for Virginia licensed dealers. And for high deductible plan holders, or for any deductible, you can't share the savings until you've paid the deductible. And then the most ironic part is, in a few minutes, we're probably going to pass a bill that says you can buy an out-of-state plan. So we're going to make Virginia licensed plans more expensive, and then we're probably going to pass a gentleman from Rockbridge's bill that says we can buy a plan that is going to be subject to what pejorative was called a race to the bottom. Whatever state whatever plan you can get approved in in North Dakota and or whatever, you can buy here to be in direct competition with our own Virginia licensed companies. So for those reasons, I hope you'll vote against the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Bedford, Delegate Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
It appears that I probably need to take my good friend shopping with me someday because I don't think he's an experienced shopper. Those of us that like to go shopping and understand the concept of saving costs understand that if you have the proper tools in front of you, whether it be an advertisement from a newspaper or somewhere else that tells you what the products cost, then you can go and shop for the best deal that fits your needs. And that's exactly the concept this bill takes. Quite frankly, I'm not talking, I never mentioned Maine in my comments on the House floor. I'm not talking about other states. This is an innovative approach that I believe when you save the costs and reduce those costs, we actually had 50% and we lowered it for the insurance companies to only share 25% so that we could ensure that they could still meet those needs and that by reducing the costs, ultimately, everyone saves money. And then the premiums go down, they don't go up. So if you want to side with the insurance companies telling you that they can't do this, then I would say vote no for the bill. If you want to stick with patients and give them the right and the power to go shopping for their health insurance needs, then I would say vote yes. Thank you.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had no intention of talking, and I'd
like to speak to the bill.
I would like to speak to the bill. I'm sorry, I didn't have any intention of talking, and I thought there was time in the personal privilege, but I know it's easy to turn off when the other party's talking, and I'm just asking if you could please listen. There's always grains of truth in bills that pass and bills that fail, and transparency is a great thing. But the primary reason that I really wanted to be here was to offer the experience that I have as a clinician and a policymaker, as a person who really loves people and really truly wants to put them ahead of party. The ACA had a lot of mistakes. I've studied the ACA for years. There were huge problems with it. And unfortunately, because of partisanship, we have not taken the time to fix that well. There are problems with the way that we are administering the Medicaid program in the state. There are ways, and I am actually a fiscal conservative. I know you don't think that exists over here, but I am. There are ways to reduce Medicaid substantially in the way it costs. But it's really important that we allow people to speak to this from new venues, to listen to different ideas, to really thoughtfully think of comprehensive ways to address this in ways that we haven't, in my opinion, done. Part of the work that I do, and part of the reason that I have stayed in my current job, which, apparently has become some kind of issue, is because I believe in data. And what I have found through data is that there are a lot of problems with what is happening in our current MCO plans. And we need outcomes data. And I believe we have soon more access to that. But it's not holding anybody accountable if we don't demand that. It's not holding people accountable if the fox is guarding the hen house. So I believe if we just go ahead on party lines and vote about this particular bill, we're destroying something before we have a chance to really fix it, because it will have the effect of sort of annihilating, what we currently have. I wish we could have more conversations. The reason I haven't spoken to it before today is because I'm new, and the stupidest thing you can do as a new person is stand up and act like you know something. But I do know something here, and I really believe I don't know that this will have any effect, but we can reduce costs. We can do things differently. There's lots of ways to look at this. And I just believe that we need more time. And I appreciate yours. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 49, noes 49.
Ayes 49, noes 49. The bill fails to pass.
Continuing with House bills on third reading regular, House Bill 79 has been taken by for the day. Next up on page 11, House Bill 239, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to hunting with the assistance of dogs, Sunday hunting exceptions.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 80, noes 19.
Ayes 80, noes 19. The bill passes.
House Bill 101, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to the Board for Contractors, tradesman licenses expiration date.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 52, noes 47.
Ayes 52, noes 47. The bill passes.
House Bill 136, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to alcoholic beverage control, annual mixed beverage special events licenses.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 1.
Ayes 95, noes 1.
One extension.
Ayes 95, noes 1, one abstention. The bill passes.
Turning to page 12 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1201, a bill to amend and reenact sections of the code related to sales of health benefit plans from persons licensed to sell such plans in other states.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 50, noes 49.
Ayes 50, noes 49. The bill passes.
House Bill 26, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to pawnbrokers' allowable late fees.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 86, noes 9.
Ayes 86, noes 9. The bill passes.
House Bill 63, a bill to amend and reenact two sections, of the Code of Virginia relating to private security compliance.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 1.
Ayes 98, noes 1. The bill passes.
Turning to page 13, continuing House Bills third reading regular, House Bill 908, a bill to amend and reenact three sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, meetings held by electronic communication means.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, noes 0.
Ayes 97, noes 0. The bill passes.
House Bill 1375, a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the definition of qualified mental health professional.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0, abstentions
Ayes 98,
1.
noes 0, one abstention. Bill passes.
And finally, Mr. Speaker, rounding out this portion of the calendar, House Bill 486, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to alcoholic beverage control, granting of certain mixed beverage licenses.
Shall this questionable bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 92, noes 6.
Ayes 92, noes 6. The bill passes.
Right. Mr. Speaker, continuing with today's calendar, next category, House bills on second reading uncontested calendar. Approximately a dozen and a half bills in the uncontested second block, beginning with House Bill 146, a bill to amend and reenact 3 sections of the code relating to the National Guard. Employment protections. The bill is reported to the Committee on Militia Police and Public Safety.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 146 is requested by the Department of Defense, and it fixes a current loophole for people who serve in the National Guard. Currently, the employment protections do not apply. The state employment protections do not apply if you live in another state but work in Virginia and are a member of the National Guard. This would close that loophole and make it apply for all National Guard members. I hope it'll be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Continuing with the block, House Bill 151, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to Special Conservators of the Peace Authority insurance. Report to the Committee on Militia Police Public Safety with a substitute.
Doug from Hanover, Douglas Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have the substitutes agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, the House Bill 151 substitute basically clarifies the authority and the jurisdiction of Special Conservators of the Peace. Well, the first things here, it requires that the order of appointment shall provide the Special Conservator of the Peace can perform only those duties for which he or she is qualified. It further provides that such duties shall be exercised only within specific geographical limitations. It prohibits Special Conservators of the Peace from using the word police on any uniform, badge, credential, or vehicle. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, the substitute provides discretion in the order of appointment for Special Conservators of the Peace employed by the Shenandoah Valley Regional Airport Commission, the Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Mr. Speaker, the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services supports House Bill 151, as does the Virginia Sheriff's Association and the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. I knew you would want to know that. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House engross House Bill 151 and pass it on to its third reading.
Continuing on page 14 in the second reading uncontested block, House Bill 161. It is a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to powers of service districts. Report for the Committee on Counties, Cities, and Towns.
The delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 161 adds general government facilities within a service district to the list of facilities that can be financed by a service district. I hope it'll be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 263 on the printed calendar has been moved to the regular calendar and is by for the day. Next up in the block, House Bill 362. It is a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to the Department of Criminal Justice Services, definition of law enforcement officer, security division of the Virginia Lottery. Report for the Committee on Militia Police and Public Safety.
Delegate from Montgomery, Delegate Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 362 strikes 2 words from the current code. Those 2 words are full and time. And so it allows the lottery to hire part-time law enforcement officers. I hope it's the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 371 on page 15 has been moved to the regular calendar in the printed version. Turning to page 16 of the printed calendar, continuing second reading uncontested, House Bill 431, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the code relating to the Enterprise Zone Grant Program, designation of Enterprise Zone, amendments to the size of Enterprise Zone. Report from the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns.
The delegate from Danville, Delegate Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, this bill codifies the minimum size and maximum size of an enterprise zone under the Enterprise Zone Grant Program administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. The bill also provides that amendments to an enterprise zone that includes elimination of any area or areas from the zone shall not exceed the maximum size provisions and shall be reviewed by the Department. I move that the bill be engrossed and move to its third reading.
House Bill 756 is a bill to amend and reenact portions of Chapter 717 of the Acts of Assembly of 1980, which provided a charter for the City of Chesapeake relating to the Director of Audit Services, City Auditor. Report from the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns.
Delegate from Chesapeake, Delegate Leftwich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 756 is a charter change for the City of Chesapeake. It would indicate that the auditor works at the will of the City Council and would also be hired solely based upon his or her professional qualifications. Host will the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Continuing with the block on page 16 of the printed calendar, House Bill 767, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to prohibition of election precinct changes for a specific period of time. Delegate Jones is of Suffolk's bill was reported for the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
Delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Jones.
Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a routine bill we do every 10 years. If you look at the bill, you'll see there some stricken language from 10 years ago. This will allow notice to our localities to freeze their precincts. So when the Census Bureau starts doing their work for the decennial census requirement of our redistricting process in 2021, they'll be on full notice. I would ask that the House would engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Turning to page 17, printed calendar, House Bill 796. It is a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the code relating to zoning disabilities. For the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns with an amendment.
The delegate from Arlington, Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendment is agreed to. Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. House Bill 796 requires the locality to give consideration to the need of reasonable modifications to requirements that are necessary to accommodate persons with disabilities whenever they're preparing for a zoning ordinance. I hope with the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 847, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the code, all relating to the Capitol Square Preservation Council. Report for the Committee on Rules.
The delegate from Hanover, Delegate Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 847 recognizes the great partnership between the Capitol Square Preservation Council and the Virginia Capitol Foundation. This bill seeks to codify a new strategic operating framework between the two organizations to better preserve our beautiful Capitol Square. I move that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 1132, a bill to amend and reenact portion of Chapter 94 of the Acts of Assembly of 1980 relating to the Dinwiddie Airport and Industrial Authority residency requirements. Report from the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns.
Delegate from Petersburg, Delegate Aird.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1132 will provide that at least 4 members of the Dinwiddie Airport and Industrial Authority shall be residents of the county and removes the requirement that 1 member of the authority be a resident of the city of Petersburg. Additionally, the bill makes a few technical changes, clearing up the way dollar amounts are referenced in the code section. Mr. Speaker, I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker, turning to page 18 of the printed calendar, continuing with the House bills on second reading uncontested block. Next up, House Bill 1367. It is a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, local sheltering data. Report from the Committee on Militia, Police, Public Safety.
The delegate from Norfolk, Delegate Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 1367 provides the Department of Emergency Management with key data related to sheltering capacity in the event of emergencies or natural disasters. This also aligns the code with a mandatory budget requirement. I move that the House engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 1424, a bill to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia relating to recounts, number permitted, tie votes. Report of the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, this is the bill that fixed the potential for an endless loop of recounts in the event of a tie that follows a recount. I think we all believed when we looked at this, that one maybe not, but it wasn't clear what happened after the under the earlier statute. If the tie resulted from a recount, you drew lots. The code said you'd get another recount. I don't think that's what we wanted to do. This bill fixes that problem. Says if the tie is a result of the canvass, the loser who pulls the losing lot can then ask for a regular recount like they would if they were the person receiving fewer votes. But if that process has already been happening, and this is the second tie essentially, there's no more recounts, and that's the final way of deciding the election. I hope it would be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 1428. It is a bill to amend and reenact several portions of Chapter 107 of the Acts of Assembly of 1901, which provide a charter for the town of Jonesville and Lee County relating to the town council. The bill has an emergency clause and was reported to the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a charter for the town of Jonesville. Reduces the number of councilmen from 7 to 5 and increases their terms from 2 to 4 years. So it'll be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Turning to page 19 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1505, a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Capitol Police, concurrent jurisdiction. Report of the Committee on Rules.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1505, really eliminates a problem that our Capitol Police have when they patrol around the Capitol, and they are, of course, assigned to patrol areas well beyond the Capitol, including the Science Museum and other places. I don't think folks realize that as they travel between those places, they lack jurisdiction to do general law enforcement if they see a drunk driver to pull them over. We've had instances where our Capitol Police have been approached by a citizen on the street advising them that someone had just assaulted them and then pointing out the person who just assaulted them, and were unable to do anything except call the Richmond Police Department. So this bill would essentially give them concurrent jurisdiction. For those worried that would encourage them to start doing general law enforcement, the department assures us that they have internal regulations and general orders that will limit the ability of their policemen to go beyond the scope of their mandate. So I would move the engrossment of the bill and passing it on to its third reading.
And Mr. Speaker, rounding out the block of House bills on second reading uncontested calendar, House Bill 1599. It is a bill to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Department of Criminal Justice Services, definitions, law enforcement officer, report on militia, police, and public safety with an amendment nature of the substitute.
The delegate from Augusta, Delegate Landis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first I'd like to move the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitutes agreed to. Delegate Landis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 1599 seeks to clarify that the Office of Inspector General's statutory authority regarding their law enforcement functions of their investigators. This legislation and clarification was suggested by the Office of the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bills be engrossed and passed to the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bills are engrossed and passed to third reading.
Continuing with today's calendar on page 19 of the printed calendar, next category is House bills on second reading regular calendar, approximately a dozen bills. in this category, beginning with House Bill 287. It is a bill to authorize the issuance of special license plates for supporters of stopping gun violence bearing the legend "Stop Gun Violence." Bill was reported to the Committee on Transportation. Mr. Speaker, advised the House there is a floor substitute to the bill offered by Delegate Simon. There are floor amendments offered by Delegate Ferris to the floor substitute.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
I move that bill go by for the day.
Delegate Gilbert moves the bill go by for the day. All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill goes by for the day.
Yeah, that's fine. Continuing with the calendar, page 20 of the printed version, House Bill 344 has been taken by for the day. House Bill 801 on the same page of the printed calendar, that has been re-referred to the Committee on ACNR. Turning to page 21 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1233 has been taken by until February 5th. Therefore, the next bill up in the category House Bill second reading regular is House Bill 48. It is a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to charitable solicitations, registration statement, report of the Committee on General Laws with a substitute.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Krizik.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Krizik.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. As you know, every year charities have to file an annual report, and those charities that come into Virginia that want to solicit donations from Virginians, they must file this annual report, and I also have to file with the annual report the IRS Tax Form 990. This bill will create a more robust disclosure in those annual reports, and it promotes accountability and transparency. And it also will sync it up with the 990. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross this bill and move to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up, House Bill 905. It is a bill to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Public Procurement Act, designation of trade secrets and proprietary information. The bill is reported to the Committee on General Laws.
The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 905 provides that a bidder, offerer, contractor shall not improperly designate as trade secrets or proprietary information an entire bid proposal or pre-qualification application, any portion of a bid proposal or pre-qualification application that does not contain trade secrets or proprietary information, or line item prices or total bid proposal or pre-qualification application prices. This bill came out of the FOIA Council. There was some question on it yesterday, and that's why it is back on today, and we cleared that up. So I ask the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
Turning to page 22 of today's printed calendar, House Bill 22 has been taken by for the day. Accordingly, next up, House Bill 158. It is a bill to amend the Code of Virginia, various sections thereof relating to technical adjustments of legislative district boundaries of the House of Delegates and Senate districts. Bill is reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 158 actually prohibits wholesale redistricting except once every 10 years in that it only allows minor technical adjustments to reduce split precincts after redistricting has been done. I hope, in light of the problems we had in this past election with split precincts, I hope it'll be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Boysko.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the intent that delegate from Spotsylvania has on this bill. However, I know that we've had similar bills in the past that have been vetoed by the governor, and I just wanted to remind the body of what the response was from the governor in 2016. Legally, there is some question on the bill's constitutionality. According to Article 2, Section 6 of the Virginia Constitution, the General Assembly shall reapportion the Commonwealth in electoral districts in accordance with this section the year 2011 and every 10 years after. Proponents of the bill would argue that this language directs the General Assembly to redistrict, but contains no limitations on the power of the legislator to redistrict in other years. However, in the case of Little et al. Versus Virginia Board of State of Elections, the Richmond Circuit Court interpreted the language to limit the General Assembly's authority to reapportion Virginia's electoral districts after 2011. That's on page 15. This finding by the court raises serious concerns about the bill's constitutionality and increases the risk for costly and time-consuming litigation. Therefore, I hope it's the pleasure of the body not to move it on. Thank you.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
I'd just like to add that there is, just because the Constitution says that you have to do reapportionment every 10 years, there is no prohibition. You could do it every year if you so desired. And again, if you're concerned about doing reapportionment more than once every 10 years, you should vote for this bill, because this would place a prohibition in the code to doing wholesale redistricting or reapportionment other than once every 10 years. And again, this is something that has been common practice for decades by the General Assembly, both by Republicans and Democrats. After redistricting, there have always been minor technical adjustments in order to get rid of split precincts. And the problem of split precincts is because while we are drawing congressional and legislative districts at the state level, and this would be true whether we do it or whether an independent commission does it, the local governments are also redrawing their own boundaries on their districts as well as their precinct boundaries. So a lot of times we don't know what the actual precinct boundaries are until after redistricting. This is a good government, good common sense bill to reduce voter confusion. I hope we will engross it and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Continuing with the House second reading regular calendar, next up is House Bill 397. It is a bill to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to absentee voting. Certain information not required when completing application in person. The bill is reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 397 attempts to correct what I believe is an anomaly in the way we treat those who vote in person on Election Day versus those who vote in person in absentee early voting. And this was brought to my attention by a constituent from Oakton, where I represent, and she had a situation where she's, for 32 years living in Fairfax County in her same house, she's gone to vote on Election Day itself. This past election cycle, she knew she was going to be out of town, so she went to the Fairfax County Government Center instead of her local precinct to vote early in person for absentee. After she filled out the form, there was a box that required her to put the last 4 digits of her Social Security number, which obviously we don't do that when we vote on Election Day itself. And so she asked whether that would be an option because she was concerned about ID theft. She and her husband had been victims of ID theft. So she said, I don't want to give my last 4 digits of Social Security number, but here's my passport, here's my driver's license, here's my voter ID card. So everything you need to prove who I am, I'm here. And the election officer said, I'm sorry, but the Code of Virginia requires that you put those 4 numbers down. And they showed her the code section and said, we're just following the law. And so she refused to put the 4 number down. The election officer told her that she was not allowed to vote. As a result, she did not vote last election. So she was pretty upset about that, contacted me and asked why we have this in the code. We studied this in the subcommittee, and to my knowledge, to all of your knowledge, I don't think there's any legislative intent to stop somebody from voting in person and on absentee if they didn't provide those 4 numbers. Obviously, if you're mailing it in, that's a way for you to verify who you are. So from that perspective, I think this is code anomaly that just has changed as we've had more photo ID requirements. So, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I ask that we move this bill and pass it on to its third reading. Engross the bill.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Turn to page 23, House Bill 427. It is a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to filling vacancies in the United States Senate. The bill is reported for the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
The delegate from Danville, Delegate Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a simple bill that is going to fix a problem. You know, if you're a member of the House of Delegates like we are, if there is a vacancy in this House, there will be a special election and the citizens decide who fills that seat. Down the hall, if the Virginia Senate has a vacancy and the citizens of Virginia decide who is going to fill that seat. In the U.S. House of Representatives, if there happens to be a vacancy, there will be a special election and the citizens of that congressional district will decide. The citizens of Virginia get to decide except for one thing. If the U.S. Senate vacancy here in the state of Virginia, one person gets to decide. That is the governor of Virginia. There are 14 states. You saw last November, in Alabama, the citizens of Alabama got to decide who is going to represent them in the Senate. So, ladies and gentlemen, simple bill. Let the 4 million plus citizens vote on who is going to fill that seat. I ask you to engross the bill and move it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up, House Bill 508. It is a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to local regulation of solar facilities. The bill is reported to the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns with an amendment in nature of substitute.
The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitutes agreed to. Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 508 confirms that a private property owner of real properties in residential, agricultural, commercial, industrial, institutional, or mixed use would have the right to put a solar array on the roof to serve the electricity needs on their property. The property owner would still need to comply with setbacks, Chesapeake Bay Historic District, architectural preservation districts, thank you, Delegate Mulligan, and other applicable requirements of the locality's ordinance. The property owner would also be subject to any condo or property owners association that otherwise regulates such installation. The legislation also provides the property owner with a right to put a ground-mounted solar facility on their real property under the same limitations, except in the case where a local government adopts an ordinance that requires such ground-mounted facilities to be subject to its zoning ordinance. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
And on page 23 of the printed calendar, House Bill 709 has been taken by for the day. Turn to page 24 of the printed calendar. Next up, House Bill 1325, a bill to amend and reenact several sections of the code relating to provisional voting, persons voting in split precincts.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 1325 again is trying to deal with some of the issues we had in split precincts. What it would do is allow a voter who is in a split precinct and is voting and he thinks he has been given the wrong ballot. He may request a provisional ballot and vote it, and then the electoral board will determine which ballot to count. I hope it'll be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up, House Bill 1405. It is a bill to amend and reenact 3 sections of the code relating to the State Board of Elections membership, appointment of the Commissioner of Elections. The bill is reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections with an amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Westmoreland, Delegate Ransom.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the body, I rise to speak on House Bill 1405, a bill that I hope will be a priority for this entire body. House Bill 1405 is a common sense solution to fix a system that many in this chamber would agree is broken. Free and fair elections are at the core of our democracy, yet for some reason we allow partisan state board of elections decide how elections are run, ballots are administered, and in the past years we saw the dysfunction of the election process. Our new colleague and my friend Delegate Thomas waited days for the certification deadline for his race to be certified. He was declared the winner after a judge finally intervened. We know the issues surrounding the board are not new. When we called both the House and Senate elections committees together in the fall of 2016 because of the confusion within the department right before a presidential election, our registrars work hard. They deserve consistency. They deserve clear guidance with uniform answers. More importantly, our voters and our Virginians deserve this. When they vote, it matters. House Bill 1405 would make the State Board of Elections nonpartisan. It increases the number of board members from 3 to 6, and the governor appoints the members. 3 would be Democrats, 3 would be Republicans. The governor also appoints the chair and the vice chair of the board. The 6-member governor-appointed board then, in agreement, would appoint the commissioner. This is truly working together, in my opinion. Mr. Speaker, this is the right thing to do for the people and for our voters. The registrars deserve this, to run their offices the way we expect them to run it. This is not a jab, Mr. Speaker, or my colleagues at the administration. I believe the governor wants to do good things, and I trust his heart. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I ask the bill be engrossed and passed on to its 3rd reading.
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Thank you. Will the gentlewoman yield for question?
Will the delegate yield for question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the gentlewoman if the registrars testified in committee on this bill. I'm talking about the Association of Registrars.
They did.
Speaker, will the gentleman yield for another question?
Will the delegate yield for another question? The
Yes,
delegate
Mr.
yields.
And I would ask the gentlewoman, if so, what did they say?
They were supportive of this bill.
And could I, Speaker, will the gentlewoman yield for another question?
Will the delegate yield for another question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate yields.
Thanks. I would ask the question to the gentlewoman about this committee that we've read about in the paper that was formed to deal with the so-called chaos of the last election cycle, and why it is that this bill was not essentially referred to that committee so that they could take up this issue in the context of a lot of other issues that need to get resolved in the aftermath of this fall's election.
Mr. Speaker, I would say that right now this is moving through the process of the chamber. We're going to hopefully it'll be engrossed today and we'll move forward, and he has the opportunity to vote as we're going through the process.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, just to clarify, this, for the most part, there are some minor differences, but for the most part, this is the legislation that was recommended by the General Registrars and Electoral Board Working Group. A version of it has been introduced before in previous years. The main difference between this one and previous ones is that before it was a 5-member board that was still maintained the partisan breakout of 3 and 2. And this one becomes truly bipartisan. So I think that's an improvement on previous years of it. And again, like I said, this bill is, for the most part, the product of the General Registrars and Local Electoral Board Working Group, and I hope it'll be the will of the body to engross it and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker, returning to page 15 of the printed calendar.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert moves the House stand in recess until 2 p.m. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House stands in recess until 2 p.m.
Mr. Speaker, the House Republican caucus will meet immediately upon the recess in House Room 1. There you have it.
You ready? The House will come to order and members take their seats. Yes. Clerk, we'll continue with the calendar.
Continuing with the calendar, Mr. Speaker, returning to page 15 of the printed version, last bill, House Bill, second reading, regular, House Bill 371. It is a bill to amend the Code of Virginia various ways relating to required sexual harassment training legislative branch. The bill is reported to the Committee on Rules with a substitute. And, Mr. Speaker, there is a floor substitute offered by Delegate Watts. In addition, Mr. Speaker, depending, I guess, based upon the disposition of the committee and the potential floor substitute, there also are line amendments offered by Delegate Watts, which are drawn to the committee substitute. Correct.
Delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House. House Bill 371 is a bill that will protect everyone in this body. Mr. Speaker, shortly after our caucus designated you to be Speaker, you led by example by issuing an open letter to our entire General Assembly community saying that sexual misconduct of any kind would not be tolerated. House Bill 371 will strengthen your proactive approach. The bill would require all members of the General Assembly, House and Senate, as well as all staff, to complete sexual harassment training every 2 years. This training has two purposes. The first, to remind us all that what is and is not appropriate behavior for a professional work environment. And secondly, to inform everyone who works on Capitol Square that there is a reporting procedure in the event there is inappropriate behavior. But, Mr. Speaker, I do want to be very clear about one thing. My colleague on the other side of the aisle, the delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts, rightfully noted in a recent news article that Virginia is different. There is something to be said for the Virginia tradition of proper behavior. The men and women in this House, both Democrats and Republicans, are collectively some of the most respectful and upstanding people that I know. This bill only seeks to ensure that the reputation of the House is always upheld. House Bill 371 is a common sense measure that I hope will draw bipartisan support. With that, I would ask the members of the House engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker. Dr. Robinson, you have a substitute.
Well, yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that we move this committee substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the substitute.
Delegate has the floor.
And I am trying to interpret the new rules. And I would understand that my comments, as they may refer to my floor substitute, are in order.
Yes, they will be.
Thank you, Mr.
Bear on the adoption of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me start exactly where the gentlelady started, when she observed that the purpose of this bill is to protect everyone in this body. My concern is far broader than that. It is to protect the public as well and to give assurance to the public that we are aware of our responsibility. This is not an inside baseball game. I may not watch Netflix as much as some. Okay. But I do, on my long journey back and forth on many things in my district and certainly back and forth to Richmond, listen constantly to 6 different news stations on my Sirius radio. And I don't know how anybody could have missed the message of the last year and a half, 2 years, that things have changed. I firmly believe that as much as I have hoped for more change before now in my lifetime, that Me Too is not going away, and that the public expects of us to assure them that we are fully accountable. Not just something that we see online, not even in an open public situation, but that we are truly accountable and transparent in our procedures. Instead, thus far, and I too had firmly hoped that this would be bipartisan, that it would go forward not with quite as much detail, but go forward much the same as we labored over exactly what we needed to have in our conflict of interest financial disclosures and all the effort that went in to make sure that there were no unintended consequences and that all sides were protected and it was a fully open process. Instead, what I got was a hearing on a true workplace harassment policy that occurred somewhere around 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, with no discussion by the committee at all of the provisions that I felt as a starter that we needed to discuss to assure the public that we were aware of what so many have endured for so many decades, and that we were going to deal with it. Therefore, the substitute that I prepared covers the critical part of the bill that I introduced, 1053. The critical part that says it's not just here in this workplace, but as elected officials, whether we accept it or not sometimes, because when I'm shopping in Home Depot, I'm not always so sure that I want to be recognized. But at every point in my official duties, I have a degree of power. And I must always recognize that power and realize that if I'm talking to an advocate, if I'm talking to a lobbyist, if I'm talking to a member of the press, if I'm talking to an intern, that I exercise that respect of power and make sure that I am treating them with the dignity of the human being standing before me. And that is first what the floor substitute would do, which is to say that our duties, that this policy would apply to officers or employees of I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong version of it, and here we go back to the right version of it, would apply to us when we are engaged in our official responsibilities as it is defined in the very chapter having to do with our responsibilities to report openly to the public with full transparency whether there has been any gift transaction or any consideration in performance of those duties. I apply that same responsibility 365 days of the year, and again, especially when I hear some of the reports coming out of other legislative bodies. And I firmly believe that, yes, we are a body of great honor and dignity, and I want to make sure that we have no question but saying to the public that we accept that mantle of power day in, day out in our public dealings. But it also, in incorporating those aspects, make sure that when we have the training, and I will address that in a moment, that it is dealing with our responsibilities and all members' responsibilities for everyone within the workplace, that it doesn't stop with the person that I hire as a manager, but I then, a very important aspect that is also part of the substitute, should this committee substitute not pass, that would say that underscore, as it is true in most training that goes on but is not really understood, if you are aware that there is harassment, and do not do anything about it, you are as guilty of perpetuating that harassment as the predator who is in fact doing it. And that too spells out in the floor substitute, which is not in what we have before us as a committee substitute, what needs to be covered in the training. It is making sure that this training is not what I have to call black box training. Because as far as I know as a member, all that governs me is the policy as administered by the Department of Human Resources for all other executive agencies. But then I read what was actually adopted in January. That's not really true. The policy that governs me is the policy that was administered for all other executive agencies in the past. It does not reflect the current wording of the policy, which was amended in 2014 to include, as it reads in the policy, sexual orientation, gender identity, and genetics. These are not in the House policy. And yet I'm being told that I can assure the public that I fall under the same policy that all other state agencies fall under, which is also why the floor substitute clarifies that what all the other employees of our our legislative agencies, like the Crime Commission or legislative services, et cetera, that the training that they get will be exactly the same as all state agencies, that there won't be a separate track, that somehow the House of Delegates, the General Assembly, is stepping back at least 5 years and refusing to accept what has become the law of the land. I think that I have probably explained enough the substance that is within the substitute that the committee substitute only literally glosses over, saying, trust us, we'll come up with a policy. It's not that I don't trust you, but I want the public to trust me, that I am part of this process in developing this policy. And that, while it's not exactly what I'd hoped for, is what I believe that we have an obligation today as the 100 members of this body to consciously speak to the public that we do protect them, not just ourselves, as well as adopting procedures that will serve to bring justice for everyone who may be involved in any reportable incident. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that it would be the will of the body to reject the committee substitute so that we might adopt the floor substitute that I have prepared.
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate may state it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we're now doing at a new regimen for how we're dealing with these things. So I want to make sure we get this right. We just heard the delegate from Fairfax make an impassioned argument for her floor substitute, which is broader than the gentlewoman's bill with amendments. And would it be my correct understanding that under the new rule, the floor substitute that the delegate from Fairfax has been proposing would never get before the body if the gentlewoman's bill with her amendments is passed by the body?
Doug is correct. If the committee substitute passes, the floor substitute will essentially go away.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlewoman from Fairfax get up on the floor again for another question?
I will resume the floor for purpose of questioning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I'd ask the gentlewoman that you're asking us to.
Mr. Speaker,
the gentlewoman yields for a question.
I yield.
Okay.
Thank
Delegate yields for a question.
Thank you. I'd ask the gentlewoman, would it be her hope that we reject the committee substitute in order that we get to your floor substitute?
It would be my hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Additional parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate may state it.
What I understand correctly, then, that committee amendments drawn to the committee substitute, if the committee substitute was passed, would be in order for consideration after the committee substitute was passed.
Yeah. Floor amendments.
Floor amendments, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone's clear. I'm going to ask, we're dealing with the committee substitute at this point. Okay? Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chair is in doubt. Chair will call for division. All those in favor, raise your right hand. This is a division. Count me too, obviously. All those opposed, like sign. Yes. Okay, so it's defeated. Okay, so the committee substitute fails.
Mr. Speaker, ayes and nays.
Hands are efficient. The ayes and nays are called for.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Delegate may state it.
Are we still in the same posture that we are debating whether to adopt Delegate Robinson's committee substitute?
Say the gentleman is correct. This vote will be on the committee substitute. This will be a recorded vote. Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 50, noes 49.
Ayes 50, noes 49. The committee substitute is agreed to. The clerk will report a floor amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Caroline,
I rise for a motion.
Trying to remember your location.
I rise for a motion.
Delegate may state it.
Given that the amendments have been distributed either electronically or in person, I would move that we pass by the amendments as a block.
Okay, Delegate Orderock moves that the amendments be passed by.
Speaker.
Delegate from Charlottesville.
Request that the amendments be severed.
Okay. Delegate asks that the amendments be severed. Do Amendment 1 first. Okay, we're voting on Amendment 1 first.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, given the ruling, I would move that we would pass by Amendment number 1.
Okay, the motion is to pass by Amendment number 1. Shall Amendment 1 be passed by?
Parliamentary inquiry?
Yeah, Delegate may state it.
Isn't it the case that the proponent and opponent get 2 minutes each on a motion to pass by?
Delegate is correct. I didn't see anybody on the board, but the delegate is correct. There's someone that can speak on the pro side and the con side. I'm sorry, I didn't see anybody on the, if you'll press the button, I would have recognized them. No problem. Okay. Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts, speaking to the motion to pass by Amendment 1.
Just speaking to the substance of Amendment 1, I hope as we have the opportunity to vote on it, this clarifies that the policy for the General Assembly will be the same policy as it has to do with sexual harassment, as is true for all other agencies in the Virginia government, and not be tied to an old version that pre-2014. Therefore, I hope that we will, if we're voting on the motion to pass by and not vote on this, I hope we will vote no on the vote to pass by, on the motion to pass by, and vote for the amendment.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion to PBI.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, yeah, we're getting to that stage of our process where I guess we're going to call it the gotcha time, where each side is trying to find something to get an advantage over the other potentially, I guess. But, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, let's be clear about what we're doing. To go with the delegate from Arlington's premise, we are in no different position from any other state employee. And I would counter that it is right and proper that we would set our own standards, because we are, of all state employees, 140 of us are the only ones who take donations for our campaigns, who have people coming by our offices trying to curry our favor on certain issues, and a very myriad of those. So, Mr. Speaker, I would hope we wouldn't engage in this gotcha game. The Rules Committee put out a policy stipulating that House and Senate leadership would come up with criteria I suspect will be more stringent than what other state employees undergo. But if it's not, we're going to be held accountable to the voters if we do this wrong. And I think they are our ultimate judge on this matter, and I hope the body will pass by the amendment and the other ones pending so that we can go ahead with the business and pass the underlying bill. Thank you.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to add that, I think we all have the same goal here. That let's be clear about that. This division, which may have just become very petty and may be just a disagreement of how we get there, is not a reflection of how we all feel about this issue. And I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being very proactive with your letter in December, where you laid out the case that such behavior will not be tolerated in this body by any member, by any lobbyist, by any staffer, that we all share the same goal. And I associate myself with the delegate from Caroline that we may well want to have a more stringent policy than the rest of the government, and we may not want to tie ourselves to the executive branch and how they choose to conduct themselves on this issue. And I just want to thank you again, Mr. Speaker, for your leadership in trying to make this assembly and this Capitol a safe place to work and to feel safe while doing so.
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this isn't about a gotcha moment. This is about what kind of standards we want to guide us. And the delegate from Fairfax has articulated a more stringent standard for us. So this is what the vote is about. The vote is not about gotcha. It's whether we want to regulate ourselves more stringently. The delegate, the gentlewoman has put forward a bill. The delegate from Fairfax has proposed modification in that bill that makes it better. And so what you're doing when you pass by the motion is you're voting for a bill that's less stringent. So let's be clear, vote no to pass by the amendment.
Shall amendment number 1 be passed by? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Ayes and nays are called for. Shall amendment number 1 be passed by?
Okay. It's on. You're on.
Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 50, noes 49.
Ayes 50, noes 49. Amendment number 1 is passed by.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
I rise for a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
I move to pass by amendment number 2.
Okay, the motion is to pass by amendment number 2, and if I could, I was a little bit lenient the first time. It really should be one person from each side. So the delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the amendment to pass by amendment number 2.
The delegate has the floor.
Just like amendment number 1, which was not a matter of being more stringent, but being equal to what is applied to all other state agencies, the amendment number 2 does exactly the same thing for all employees of the legislative body, except for the members and our direct staff, which are covered in the 3rd amendment. This brings us on a par with what is expected of all other state agencies as far as legislative employees, just as Amendment 1 did. And so we cannot say that we're going to be more stringent then and reject the wording that brings us just up to what is practiced for other state agencies. I trust it will be the pleasure to vote against the motion to pass by and vote for this amendment.
The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would hope that when
Delegate like to speak to.
Yes, I'd like to
motion.
speak to the
Delegate has the
motion.
floor.
I would hope that we have a lot of faith in the clerk of the House and the clerk of the Senate. And I'm hoping that, through this process, one of the things they're going to consider is the training course that's available through the Department of Human Resource Management. This is the course right here. And it took me about 45 minutes to read through it. And every one of the sections includes what needs to be done if there's a problem and things. And I'm sure that the clerk of the House and the clerk of the Senate will be including those, what needs to be done to protect the public, to protect us, to make us to the highest level that we need to be in this training. And so I trust them, and they'll develop that appropriate course. And so I hope we can defeat this amendment.
Shall amendment number 2 be passed by? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The amendment's passed by. The sufficient hands for ayes and nays. Shall amendment number 2 be passed by? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 50, noes 49.
Ayes 50, noes 49. Amendment number 2 is passed by.
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, I'd move to pass by amendment number 3.
Delegate Orrock moves to pass by amendment number 3. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the motion to pass by amendment number 3.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment, above all of the amendments, is what we are saying to the public that we take responsibility for. We are not saying it's going to be decided by somebody else, however much we might respect somebody else. This is guidance to, if that's your measure, then just take this as guidance, that you're willing to look at the face of anyone who approaches you on this issue and say, this is what I support. I am your elected official. I take responsibility for saying what the basic outline of the policy of the House of the General Assembly should be. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to reject the motion to pass by.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this is us taking responsibility for this issue. By having our clerks develop this policy, we are saying to the world that we are, pursuant to your letter, being accountable for the things we do here and for the things that go on in the buildings that we occupy and operate. and that we are taking responsibility for this issue. And I think this is much ado about nothing, and we are being very aggressive and very forward-thinking and very responsive to this issue, and we have been for some time. And so I appreciate everybody in being willing to work with us on this, but we are being responsive, and we are being proactive, and we are being responsible, and we are being accountable to the public on this issue with this bill, and I would ask that we pass by this amendment.
Shall Amendment number 3 be passed by? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The amendment's passed through. There's sufficient enough for ayes and nays. Shall Amendment number 3 be passed by? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 50, noes 49.
Ayes 50, noes 49. Amendment 3 is passed by. The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Robinson.
All right, Mr. Speaker, I think we've said an awful lot about this bill already. And I, again, would like to have the House engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker, that completes today's calendar.
Per House Rule 51, the House has returned to the morning hour. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communications?
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon's meeting schedule is as follows.
Let's listen to the announcements.
Immediately upon adjournment of the House, Courts of Justice Subcommittee 2 will be meeting down in House Room 1. It's a change in time, so immediately upon adjournment of the House, Courts Sub 2 in House Room 1. 1/2 hour after adjournment of the House, Courts Sub Number 1. They will be in House Room 3. Delegate Habib's subcommittee is in House Room 1. Delegate Gilbert's is in House Room 3. 45 minutes after adjournment of the House, approximately 3:15, the Appropriations Committee will be meeting in the shared committee room on the ground floor of the Pocahontas. This is a change in time. Approps will be meeting 45 minutes after adjournment. Then, presumably once the full committee is finished, Appropriations, Commerce, Ag, and Natural Resources and Technology Subcommittee, they will be meeting in the shared room. And then once they are complete, Appropriations, Elementary and Secondary Education Subcommittee. This is a change in day, time, and location for them. So Appropriations, then Commerce, Agriculture, Natural Resources, Technology Subcommittee, followed by Elementary and Secondary Ed sub of Approps, all in the shared committee room. Mr. Speaker, a half hour after adjournment, the House approximately 2, a little thereafter, the Finance Committee, Subcommittee Number 1, they will be meeting in the House Committee room on the ground floor of the Pocahontas building. Finance Sub 1, chaired by Delegate Byron, will be meeting half hour after adjournment. Then, once they're finished, presumably, Finance Subcommittee Number 2 will be meeting. They will be up in the 200A Subcommittee room. Mr. Speaker, correction on that. They're 1.5 hours after adjournment of the House. They'll be in a different room in 200A Subcommittee. So Delegate Hugo, Subcommittee 2, will be 1.5 hours after, and the second floor Subcommittee A, 1/2 hour afterwards for Delegate Byron, Subcommittee 1 of Finance in the House Committee room. At 4 o'clock today, Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources, Subcommittee Number 2, they will be meeting in the 300A Subcommittee room on the third floor. At 4 o'clock as well, County, Cities, and Towns Subcommittee Number 2, they will be meeting in the 400B Subcommittee room on the fourth floor of Pocahontas. At 4 o'clock as well, Transportation Subcommittee Number 3, they will be meeting in the 400A Subcommittee. At 5 o'clock, Health, Welfare, and Institutions Subcommittee Number 1, they will be in the 400C Subcommittee room, the fourth floor. That's at 5 o'clock. And then finally, at 5 today, the Rural Caucus will be meeting in the second floor, Senate Room 2. Rural. And, Mr. Speaker, looking ahead to tomorrow, Thursday, February 1st, 7 a.m., the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus will meet at 7 in the 200B subcommittee room. At 8 o'clock, the New Americans Caucus, they will be meeting in the 300B subcommittee room. Back at 7 o'clock in the morning, the Health Welfare Institutions Subcommittee number 1, they will be meeting at 7 o'clock. They'll be in the House Committee room on the first floor, Pocahontas Building. At 7:30 tomorrow, Militia, Police, and Public Safety Subcommittee number 2. They will be meeting at 7 o'clock. So Militia, Police, Public Safety Subcommittee number 2 will be meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow in the 300A subcommittee room. So we will update the schedule accordingly. At 7:30, the Privileges and Elections Subcommittee number 2, they'll be meeting at 7:30 in the 400A subcommittee room on the fourth floor of Pocahontas. Tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m., the Committee on Transportation, they'll be in House Room 3 down in the extension here in the Capitol. At 9:30 tomorrow, the Committee on Health, Welfare, and Institutions, they'll be meeting in the House Committee room on the ground floor over in the Pocahontas Building. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Democratic Caucus meeting at 11:15 tomorrow in House Room 2, and the Republican Caucus at 11:15 as well. So Republicans at 11:15 in House Room 1, Democrats 11:15 in House Room 2. Mr. Speaker, that completes the announcements I have at this time.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert, moves that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 12 noon. This means in favor of that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House do now adjourn.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert, moves the House do now adjourn. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until 12 noon.